Follow Moonlit Romance Library for fierce heroines, dangerous kings, and love that earns its harbor. Chapter 1. The island in the bride price the Dragon King gave away Nyra's homeland between the second toast and the wedding cake. He did it smiling. To my radiant bride, King Lucian announced, lifting a gold cup above the royal banquet, I grant the Black Glass Isles, with every harbor, orchard, salt field, and obedient soul upon them. The court applauded. Nyra stood below the dais with rain still darkening the shoulders of her blue sea cloak. For one stunned breath, she heard nothing but the small crackle of candles and the old memory of Lucian laughing in a fishing boat, before crowns had sharpened his smile. Then the applause became thunder. The bride, Celestine Vale, sat wrapped in cloth of gold. She was beautiful enough to make men forgive the taxes required to look at her. Her pale blonde hair had been braided with pearls. Her face remained composed, but her fingers tightened around the stem of her cup. Nyra could not tell whether that meant guilt or triumph. Lucian looked straight at Nyra. He wanted her to bow. That was the true gift he meant to give his new queen. Not an island, but the sight of its last tidekeeper kneeling. Nyra walked to the banquet table instead. 2 guards moved to stop her. She set her soaked leather chart case on top of the wedding cake. The top tier collapsed. White icing slid down the carved sugar dragons. One landed upside down in the custard. Someone gasped. Nyra hoped it was the royal baker and not the kingdom. My apologies, she said. The island appears heavier than His Majesty remembered. A few older ladies covered smiles with jeweled hands. Lucian's mouth flattened. Nyra pulled out a blue-black tide chart and unrolled it across the table. Plates, flowers, and one startled roast pheasant disappeared beneath a map of the Western Sea. Black glass is not yours to give, she said. It's harbor's answer to the island council. It's tide's answer to the moon. And its people answer badly to men who call them obedient. You were summoned to authenticate the harbor seal, Lucian said. His voice stayed mild, which meant he was furious. Not to perform. Then authenticate this. Nyra placed one finger on the narrow waters east of Black Glass. 3 red currents twisted around the island like knotted rope. The widow tide turns in 3 days. Without my island's beacons, your fleet will enter on a falling moon and meet reefs sharp enough to shave a whale. She looked at the admirals, then at Lucian. 3 days from now, without my island, not one of your ships will come home. Silence struck the hall. Admiral Vare, a square man with a red neck and the permanent expression of someone offended by chairs, laughed too loudly. A fisherwoman's threat. Nyra traced the route his ships had filed with the harbor office. Your lead vessel draws 19 feet. The South Channel gives you 17 at high water. It is not a threat, Admiral. It is arithmetic. The older ladies smiled openly now. Lucian descended from the dais. He wore black scales over his shoulders, polished until they shone blue in the candlelight. Dragon kings claimed the scales proved divine blood. Nyra knew they proved only that some tailor had excellent patience. He stopped close enough for her to smell the cedar oil he had used when they were young. Walk with me, he said. It was phrased as an invitation, for guards made it an arrest. They took her through a side door into the rain-dark gallery. Tall windows overlooked the royal harbor, where 60 warships waited with furled sails. Beyond them, lightning flickered over the western sea. Lucian dismissed the guards to the archway. He kept one hand on Nyra's chart case, holding it between them like a shared secret. You always did know how to make a room look at you, he murmured. You always did mistake public alarm for admiration. His eyes warmed despite himself. Once, that warmth had undone her. He had been a landless prince then, 23 and hungry, hiding from his father's assassins in a little boat off Black Glass. Nyra had taught him to read clouds. He had taught her court dances on a deck barely wide enough for 2 pairs of feet. He had promised that if he ever won a crown, no king would own the sea again. Apparently he had meant no other king. I do not want Black Glass harmed, he said. I want it protected under the crown. Celestine's marriage treaty gives me the ships to secure the western route. By giving her a place you do not own. By giving her a title, the island remains where it is. That must comfort the people being included with the salt fields. Lucian's fingers tightened on the case. Open the old channel for the fleet. Light the deep beacons. After the wedding, I will name you Royal Mistress of Tides. You may govern Black Glass in my name. You mean I may keep my home if I first agree it belongs to you? He stepped closer. I mean I am offering you the place beside me that should have been yours. There it was, the little boat, polished and presented as a chain. Naira's heart hurt. She hated it for remembering him before he became this man. You married someone else this morning, she said. For ships. How romantic. Does she know? Celestine understands duty. Then perhaps you should ask her to navigate the widow tide. Lucien's gaze hardened. The fleet sails in 3 days. You will guide it. No. He caught her wrist. Naira had endured 6 weeks in his palace because Black Glass needed grain permits. She had endured whispered insults, searched rooms, and Admiral Vere putting his hand on the small of her back as though testing fruit. She had told herself patience was not cowardice when other people ate because of it, but Lucien's thumb pressed the small scar where he had once tied a red courtship ribbon. Something in her stopped being patient. She drove her knee upward. The Dragon King made a sound no royal musician would ever include in a ballad. He folded against the window ledge. Naira took back her chart case. That, she said, breath shaking, was arithmetic too. She ran. The guards shouted. Naira flew down a servant's stair, through the steamy kitchens, and straight into the wedding banquet again. People rose as she crossed the hall. Lucien's roar followed from the gallery. At the center table, Celestine looked from Naira to the doorway. For half a heartbeat, the golden bride lifted one finger and pointed toward a narrow passage behind the musicians. Naira did not know why. She took it anyway. The passage led to the palace water gate. Rain hammered the steps. A small brown shape waited on the lowest stone with Naira's silver sea law badge in its teeth. Pip, Naira said. The otter blinked, tucked the badge into the little leather harness crossing its chest, and dove into the black water. Pip, that is not help. That is theft with encouraging timing. The otter surfaced beside a departing barge, chirped, and scrambled aboard. Naira recognized the black wolf painted on the barge's sail. Every sailor in the Western Kingdoms knew it. The vessel belonged to Malo Thorn, the Wolf of Blackwater, ruler of the Marsh clans, breaker of royal blockades, and the one man Lucien had ordered hanged twice. Naira heard boots above her. She jumped. Chapter 2. The otter who collected keys. Naira had first met Pip in a prison made for creatures no priest admitted existed. It had been 4 years earlier, before Lucien's crown, and after the first slave ships began vanishing from official harbor records. Naira had followed the sound of metal beneath a ruined customs house on the northern edge of Black Glass. She found 7 river folk chained in a flooded cellar. In moonlight, river folk could wear human shapes. In fear, pain, or strong excitement, they became sleek brown otters with clever hands and stronger teeth. The traffickers called them animals because it made the chains easier to sell. One small otter had been outside the cage. It kept trying keys from a stolen ring, turning each one with both paws, dropping the failures into a neat pile. It had bitten through half a leather glove and looked prepared to continue through the owner. You need the long brass key, Naira had whispered. The otter bared its teeth at her. Yes, I know. Humans are disappointing. I have met several. She knelt in the water and offered her open palm. After a long moment, the otter placed the key ring in it. Together they freed the prisoners. The traffickers returned before the last chain opened. Naira remembered swinging a bucket into one man's face, the otter clan surging past her, and Pip reappearing in the moonlit alley as a skinny young woman with wet brown curls, round cheeks, and 3 keys braided into her hair. Pretty, Pip had explained, pointing to the keys. Then she shifted back and stole Naira's boot buckle. Since that night, Pip had become the Blackwater clan's key collector. When Marsh sailors found a wreck, Pip recovered lockets, rings, letters, and keys from the dead. She carried them home to widows and mothers. She never kept a wedding ring. She kept nearly every attractive key. Now, as Naira hit the deck of Malo Thorn's barge shoulder first, she saw Pip vanish through a hatch with the silver sea law badge. Naira rolled behind a stack of rope. Rain blinded her. Palace guards crowded the water steps 20 yards away, but the barge had already entered the current. Stop that vessel, Admiral Vere shouted. No one aboard obeyed. Naira pushed wet hair from her face and crawled toward the hatch. A bare foot came down on the rope in front of her hand. She looked up. The man above her had apparently dressed during a shipwreck and lost an argument with his shirt. Water ran from black hair over a broad, bare chest crossed by a leather sword harness. A pale scar cut along his ribs and disappeared beneath the waistband of black trousers. His face was lean, hard, and unfairly handsome, with a straight nose, dark brows, and amber eyes that caught the lantern light like banked fire. Mallow Thorne looked 29, though wolf shifters were difficult to age. He looked even more dangerous than the wanted posters and considerably less clothed. He held a curved knife in one hand. "I can explain," Naira said. "People who board my ship from Royal Water Gates usually can." He caught her upper arm and brought her to her feet in one smooth pull. The barge turned. Naira slipped on the rain-slicked deck and struck his chest. His arm closed around her waist. For one breath they stood pressed together, her soaked blue dress against his warm skin. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then returned to her eyes with such deliberate control that heat moved through her in a very inconvenient direction. Pip popped out of the hatch behind him, wearing the Sealaw badge around her neck. "Pip," Naira said. "Give it back." The otter shook her head. Mallow glanced over his shoulder. Pip dove between his legs. His belt came loose. Naira caught the belt before his trousers could become a diplomatic incident. Mallow caught Naira before she fell backward over the rail. The knife clattered harmlessly onto a coil of rope. Pip stood on a barrel with the belt buckle in her teeth. Mallow stared at her. The otter stared back. "She likes pretty metal," Naira said. "That buckle was my father's." Pip placed it carefully beside her collection, which suggested respect but not remorse. Boots pounded up from below. 3 armed marsh sailors emerged, led by a tall woman with deep brown skin, silver beads in her braided black hair, and a red captain's coat. A saber hung at each hip. "Royal Guards are launching boats," the woman said. Her eyes landed on Naira. "And we have acquired a wet noblewoman." "Bad trade, Mallow." "Put her back." "I am not a noblewoman," Naira said. The captain looked at the pearls sewn into Naira's cuffs. They had been a gift from Lucien years ago. "Of course not. You are merely dressed as the problem." Mallow took his belt from Pip. The otter allowed this only after removing the buckle. "Name," he said to Naira. "Naira Vale of Blackglass. Tidekeeper under the Free Harbor Charter." The captain's expression sharpened. "Lucien's old favorite." The words struck harder than Naira expected. She lifted her chin. "Former mistakes are not hereditary titles." Mallow's mouth almost smiled. Another shout came across the water. Arrows struck the stern. One buried itself in the mast. Mallow moved Naira behind him. The motion was instant and thoughtless. He raised one hand, and the barge's crew sprang into action. "Nessa, take the west cut," he ordered. The female captain seized the tiller. "West cut is flooded with timber." Naira looked past the stern. Palace boats fanned behind them. Ahead, the river split around Reed Islands. Lanterns showed a wide western channel and a narrow eastern throat choked with white flowers. "Not west," she said. "East." Nessa snorted. "The east throat dead ends. At low tide." The rain lifted the peat shelf. "There is a channel under the lilies." "And how would a royal pet know Blackwater?" "Because I charted the drowned villages after the spring flood." An arrow skimmed Naira's sleeve. Mallow looked at her, not the approaching boats. "Can you steer it?" "Yes." He crowded her against the rail, one hand braced beside her head. The barge pitched beneath them. Up close, his amber eyes held a thin dark ring, a wolf trait no human disguise could hide. "Steal onto my ship," he said softly, "and you have 2 choices. Pay the toll, or stay and take the helm." Naira glanced at the royal archers. "What is the toll?" "Something you value." "The helm it is." His smile flashed at last. "Good answer." He put her hand on the tiller. Nessa muttered something about men, rain, and preventable disasters, but moved aside. Naira turned the barge east. The lilies looked solid enough to walk upon. She drove straight into them. Leaves slapped the bow. Mud rose on either side. The royal boats followed, their captains laughing as the channel narrowed. "Now?" Mallow asked. Naira felt the tiller kick. "Not yet." A submerged log scraped the hull. Nessa's hand went to her saber. "Now." "You are a very impatient king." "I am trying to die efficiently." The current changed beneath Naira's palm. Cool water twisted under the rudder. "Now." Everyone left. The crew ran to port. The barge leaned, sliding over the hidden peat shelf by the width of a hand. Behind them, the first royal boat struck the shelf head-on. Men flew into waist-deep mud. The second boat rammed the first. Admiral Vere, standing grandly at the bow, disappeared into a bed of lilies. Pip climbed onto the stern and waved his stolen hat. Naira laughed before she could stop herself. Malo watched her rather than the wreck behind them. So the tidekeeper does smile. Only for sound navigation. And drowning admirals? Vere surfaced with a lily draped over one ear. That too, she admitted. The hidden current carried them beyond the palace lights and into Blackwater Marsh. Chapter 3. The Wolf of Blackwater at Dawn. The marsh looked like a secret the world had failed to keep. Black cypress trees rose from silver water. Moss hung in long curtains. Narrow channels flashed between islands of reeds, and white herons lifted into pink sky as the barge passed. Naira stood at the bow wearing Malo's dry coat over her damp dress. It smelled faintly of cedar smoke and clean rain. She had refused it twice. He had put it around her shoulders without arguing a third time. That should not have felt as intimate as it did. Behind her, Nessa questioned a palace messenger they had pulled from the mud. He was 17, terrified, and carrying a sealed order inside his boot. Naira opened it using her authority as a tidekeeper. Nessa opened it because she had a knife. The order commanded Admiral Vere to seize Blaglass's beacon towers before the royal fleet sailed. It also named Naira a traitor and offered 200 crowns for her capture alive. Alive, Malo repeated. He stood beside her now, fully dressed in black leather and a dark green coat. It was almost disappointing. Lucien needs my knowledge, Naira said. The widow tide changes every channel around the island. Then he will come after you. He already has. Malo read the order again. His thumb rested over the royal seal. Nessa, send the boy back with a message. Nessa produced ink. Polite or accurate? Both. Tell Lucien that Naira Vale is under Blackwater protection. Anyone who touches her vessel declares war on me. Naira turned. My vessel? You took the helm. Blackwater law is annoyingly literal. I am not sure that is law. It became law just now. Nessa rolled her eyes, so hard Naira feared for her balance. And if I choose to leave? Naira asked. Malo's expression did not change, but the wolf ring around his irises widened. Then I will provide a boat, provisions, and every chart we have. Just like that, the ship may be under my protection. The course is yours. It was the opposite of everything Lucien had offered. No title. No gilded cage. A choice so plainly given that Naira distrusted how much she wanted to believe it. Pip climbed her coat, settled across her shoulders like a damp fur collar, and began sorting keys beside Naira's ear. I need to reach Blackglass before the fleet, Naira said. If Vere controls the beacons, he can force island pilots aboard. People will die. My ship, the Marsh Queen, waits at Reed Crown, Malo said. She can outrun Lucien's war galleys through the inside channels. Nessa folded the message. Or we can avoid a king's private quarrel and continue carrying the evidence that might end his reign. Naira looked at her. What evidence? Nessa's mouth closed. Malo said, 6 months ago, one of our crews captured a royal broker off the southern shoals. We found copies of slave contracts linking Lucien's admirals to the riverfolk trade. Names, payments, ship registrations. Pip went still on Naira's shoulders. The marsh seemed to quiet with her. Naira remembered 7 chained shapes in a flooded cellar. Where are the contracts? Aboard the Marsh Queen, Malo said. We were taking them to the Free Ports Tribunal when Lucien closed the river. That is why he is sending the fleet west. He says it is to protect his bride's trade route. It is not. Naira pictured Lucien's hand on her chart case, his insistence that she light the deep beacons. A cold understanding moved through her. The western route passes Blackglass because every other channel is too shallow. If your ship carries the contracts, Lucien knows you must pass my island. Nessa watched her. Convenient that his former lover now knows our plan. Naira felt the accusation land. I did not know. You knew him. That seems dangerous enough. Nessa, Malo warned. No. We have buried river children, while palace ladies wore pearls purchased with their chains. I will not trust a woman because you like how she holds a tiller. Malo's gaze went flat. Captain. Naira touched his sleeve before the command sharpened. The contact startled them both. She is right to ask, Naira said. I spent years believing Lucian could still become the man he promised to be. That belief made me slow. It did not make me his ally. Nessa studied her. What will make you trust me? Naira asked. Nothing you say. Fair. Then watch what I do. Pip chirped agreement and dropped a brass key down the front of Malo's coat. He froze. Naira pressed her lips together. Do not, he said. I have done nothing. Your face is preparing to. The key slid lower. Malo closed his eyes. Nessa began to laugh. It transformed her stern face, making her look younger and far less inclined to stab the morning. Pip plunged one paw into Malo's collar after the key. The Wolf of Blackwater, feared from the royal court to the southern delta, yelped and nearly walked off the barge. Even the messenger boy laughed. By noon, Reed Crown appeared above the trees, a village built on linked wooden platforms around an ancient stone tower. Boats hung from cranes. Children with amber wolf eyes raced barefoot along the walkways. Women repaired nets beneath bright awnings. No walls separated the ruler's house from the kitchens, workshops, or docks. The Marsh Queen waited beyond the last platform. She was a long, low ship with black sails, twin rudders, and a silver wolf at the prow. Her crew loaded barrels while a broad-shouldered older woman shouted at them from the dock. That is Aunt Isabet, Malo said. She raised me. She believes every crisis improves when fed. A sound military doctrine. Isabet reached them before the gangplank settled. Her gray-streaked hair was tied in a red scarf, and her amber eyes moved from Malo to Naira to Malo's coat around Naira's shoulders. You went to steal medicine, she said. I brought medicine. You also brought a woman. She came separately. They often do. Malo looked toward the sky as though asking the moon for restraint. Isabet took both Naira's hands. Her grip was warm and dry. You are cold. You are thin. He has not fed you. We met last night. Plenty of time. Malo disgraceful. I offered her dried fish. That is not food. That is a threat. Naira liked Isabet immediately. She liked her even more when the older woman led her to a kitchen where stew simmered over coals, and no one asked her to bow. For 1 hour, Naira ate, dried her hair, and listened while Malo's council argued over maps. The royal army controlled the broad river. The Marsh Queen could reach Blackglass through a chain of old flood channels, but one iron gate blocked the route at St. Ara's monastery. The monks sold the gatehouse to Lord Harrow, Nessa said. He charges anyone without a royal pass. Pip, curled beside the fire, opened one eye at the word gate. No, Malo told her. Pip rolled onto her back. Absolutely not. She covered her face with both paws. Naira leaned toward Isabet. Can she understand every word? Only the ones involving food, keys, or instructions she plans to ignore. Naira rose and studied the map. St. Ara's gate sat where 3 waterways narrowed into one stone passage. Lucian's men would expect them to force it or turn south. We do neither, she said. We let them arrest us. Nessa stared at her. I was beginning to reconsider hating you. Lord Harrow likes legal prizes. My sea law badge gives me authority to inspect any vessel suspected of carrying stolen royal property. Which we are, Malo said. Which means he will bring us inside the gatehouse to claim a reward. Pip can open the flood controls from within. Pip sat up, delighted. Then, Naira continued, we release the monastery mill pond. The sudden current will open the lower bypass and carry the Marsh Queen through. Nessa crossed her arms. And what stops Harrow from hanging us before your otter finds the right key? Pip made an offended squeak. Moon otter, Naira corrected. And she has standards. Pip selected a copper key from her harness, considered it, and ate a crumb off it. Mostly, Naira added. Malo studied the map, then Naira. We do it. You trust her quickly, Nessa said. No. His eyes stayed on Naira. I trust what she does when cornered. Naira remembered Lucian bent over a window ledge. Heat touched her cheeks. Malo's wolf hearing was excellent. Unfortunately, so was his imagination. His slow smile told her he had heard her heartbeat change. Chapter 4. A gate, a wolf, and one very bad bishop. Lord Harrow arrested them before sunset. He was not technically a bishop, but he dressed like one because purple robes made extortion look ceremonial. His men lowered a chain across the water at St. Ara's gate and aimed crossbows at the Marsh Queen. Naira stood at the bow in a borrowed gray gown. Malo waited 2 steps behind her with his wrists loosely tied, playing the captured outlaw. Nessa had objected to that part of the plan until Malo asked whether she would rather play his grieving wife. She had tied his ropes personally. By authority of the Dragon Crown, Harrow called from the gatehouse balcony, "Surrender the vessel and all unlawful cargo." "I hold a royal sea law commission," Naira called back. "I have captured Malo Thorn and require immediate passage to the capital." Harrow peered down at Malo. Greed brightened his face. Lucian's reward for the Wolf of Blackwater was large enough to purchase a minor province or several major sins. "Bring them in," he ordered. The iron chain lowered. The Marsh Queen entered a stone basin beneath the gatehouse. Soldiers swarmed aboard. Naira let them take her dagger. They missed the bone pin in her hair and the small moon otter hiding inside a coil of rope. Harrow received them in a chamber overlooking the locked eastern gate. He sat beneath a painted saint and wore 6 rings on 5 fingers. His purple robe strained over his stomach. "The crown named you traitor this morning," he told Naira. "By evening you return with its most wanted enemy. Remarkable loyalty. I have always been flexible before supper." Malo coughed to hide a laugh. Harrow circled him. "They say you turn into a black wolf large enough to carry off a horse. Only small horses. They say silver weakens you. Tax collectors weaken me. Silver merely irritates." Harrow nodded to a guard, who pressed a silver-tipped spear against Malo's back. Malo's shoulders locked. Naira saw the pain he hid. The metal did not need to break skin. Close contact burned wolf blood like frost. She had not known that when they made the plan. "Enough," she said. Harrow smiled. "Concerned for your prisoner?" "Concerned you will damage the crown's property before I am paid." Malo looked at her. She hoped he saw apology beneath the lie. Harrow stepped close to Naira. "Payment can be arranged. I am told you no longer enjoy the king's private favor. Perhaps you seek another patron." His ringed hand closed over her hip. Naira became very still. She had learned that men like Harrow mistook stillness for surrender. It saved time. She pulled the bone pin from her hair and drove it through the wide sleeve of his robe into the wooden table. Harrow jerked back. His robe held. The seam tore from wrist to armpit, trapping his arm over his head and exposing a linen undershirt printed with tiny pink roses. Naira stepped away. "Your saint is watching." Nessa, supposedly another prisoner, kicked the nearest guard behind the knee. Malo twisted free of his loose ropes and struck the silver spear aside. His eyes flared gold. Chaos filled the room. Naira ducked a crossbow. Nessa used her bound wrists to catch a soldier around the neck and flip him into Harrow's supper. Malo moved with brutal grace, fast enough to seem less human even before black fur rippled over his hands. He punched one guard into a cupboard, caught another by the belt, and tossed him through a curtain into a bath. No one bled. Everyone screamed. Harrow ripped his sleeve free and lunged for Naira. She seized a silver serving tray and hit him flat across the face. He sat down abruptly in a bowl of soup. "You struck a holy officer," he sputtered. "Then pray for better reflexes." Below them, a bell began to ring. Pip. Naira ran to the eastern window. The moon otter scrambled along a turning gear, trying keys in the mill pond control box. Soldiers raced across the lower bridge toward her. "Malo!" He saw. His body changed as he ran. The shift was not the grotesque breaking of bones from sailors' tales. It was a dark sweep of motion, man becoming muscle, fur, and speed. A huge black wolf cleared the stair rail in one leap. He landed between Pip and the soldiers with teeth bared. The men stopped so quickly that one lost both boots. Pip found the key. The control wheel spun. Ancient gears groaned beneath the floor. Water exploded through the lower channels, flooding the stone basin and lifting the Marsh Queen against her ropes. "Back to the ship!" Nessa shouted. Naira ran down the stairs. Harrow caught the back of her gown. The fabric tightened against her throat. She spun and stamped on his foot. When he did not release her, she grabbed one of the decorative golden cords around his neck and pulled. Harrow toppled forward. His forehead struck the great bronze dinner bell. The sound rolled across the monastery. 3 sacks of flour fell from a crane. One burst directly over Harrow. He rose white from head to toe, purple robe torn, pink roses showing, and stumbled into the released mill pond. Naira reached the dock as the Marsh Queen tore free. The gap widened too quickly. Nessa threw a rope. It fell short. Naira looked at the black water rushing between stone walls. Then a great black wolf appeared beside her. Malo lowered his shoulders. "You cannot mean that," she said. He looked at the departing ship, then at her. "I have never ridden a wolf." His ears flattened. That was not criticism. Crossbowmen filled the upper balcony. Naira climbed onto his back. Malo ran 3 steps and jumped. For one impossible moment, there was only water below and wind tearing a cry from her throat. Naira wrapped both arms around his neck. The wolf struck the Marsh Queen's stern hard enough to slide 6 feet across the deck. They crashed into a net together. The ship shot through the opening gate as arrows splashed behind it. Naira lay tangled beneath a mountain of black fur. Malo's heart pounded against her ribs. Pip climbed onto his head, still holding the gate key, and planted one paw between his ears like a victorious admiral. Nessa leaned over them. "This is the worst rescue I have ever seen." The wolf showed his teeth. "Do not growl at me. You landed on the Tidekeeper." Naira tried to push herself up. One of Malo's forelegs was braced on either side of her, his golden gaze fixed on her face. The world narrowed strangely. She touched the fur at his neck. It was softer than she expected, dense and warm from exertion. "Thank you," she whispered. His nose brushed her cheek. It might have been an accident. It did not feel like one. Then Pip dropped the stolen key down the front of Naira's gown. Naira yelped. Malo shifted back in a rush of dark motion and landed half over her, human, breathless, and once again suffering from an uncertain relationship with shirts. The entire crew found urgent reasons to look elsewhere. Naira retrieved the key, while keeping her eyes firmly on Malo's face. "Your moon otter has terrible timing," he murmured. "She is not my moon otter." Pip curled up possessively on Naira's stomach. Malo raised one brow. "The evidence is mixed," Naira admitted. Chapter 5. The Golden Bride's knife. The Marsh Queen reached open water the next morning. Naira should have felt safer beyond the monastery guns. Instead, unease followed her like a second shadow. Lucien had known she would refuse him. He had announced Black Glass as Celestine's dowry in front of the court because humiliation was meant to force a choice: obey him or run toward the only ship carrying evidence against him. Had he planned even that? She stood in the chart room with Malo, Nessa, and Pip while rain tapped the roof. The slave contracts lay inside a locked iron chest under the table. Malo had shown her 3 pages. They bore Admiral Vare's signature, Lord Harrow's seal, and payments routed through the royal household. Lucien's name did not appear. "He kept his own hands clean," Nessa said. "He always loved clean hands," Naira replied. "Other people did the bleeding." Malo leaned over the chart, one palm planted beside Naira's. His dark hair was still damp from the deck. Since the gatehouse, she had become too aware of the width of his shoulders and the small pause he made before touching her, as though every inch was offered rather than taken. "If Lucien wanted only the contracts," he said, "he could burn the Marsh Queen in the river. Why drive us toward Black Glass?" Naira touched the black ink marking her island. "Because the old channels make a blockade difficult. He needs the beacon towers. Or he needs me." Pip was picking the lock on the biscuit cupboard. Nessa slapped one hand over the keyhole. Pip looked betrayed. "You had breakfast," Nessa said. Pip pointed at Malo. "He is larger than you." Pip puffed herself into the approximate shape of a larger otter. Before Nessa could answer, a bell sounded from the mast. "Sail east," a lookout called. They ran on deck. A white royal cutter approached under a flag of truce. At its bow stood a woman in a gold cloak, her pale hair unmistakable even beneath the hood. "Celestine." "It is a trap," Nessa said. "Almost certainly," Malo agreed. Naira watched the cutter pitch through the gray water. 4 royal guards stood behind Celestine. No escort ships followed within sight. "Bring her alongside," Naira said. Nessa turned on her. "She accepted your home as a wedding gift." "I know. I was there." "Then you cannot seriously mean to invite her aboard." "I mean to find out why a new queen crossed a storm in a boat small enough to fit inside her wardrobe." Malo gave the order. Celestine boarded alone. She moved carefully across the wet deck, gold skirts gathered in one hand. The royal guards remained on their cutter after Malo's crew aimed 12 crossbows at them. Naira received her in the chart room. Nessa stood by the door. Malo stood by Naira, close enough that the back of his hand brushed hers. Celestine looked at the contact. Naira pulled her hand away first and immediately wished she had not. The queen removed her cloak. Beneath it, her gold wedding gown had been cut short at the knee for movement. Mud stained the hem. A slim knife was strapped to her calf. "That is practical bridal wear," Naira said. "My mother told me marriage required a sharp blade and comfortable shoes. She died before explaining which was for the husband." Nessa made a choking sound that might have been reluctant approval. Celestine placed a leather ledger on the table. "Lucien's fleet changed its cargo after the banquet. Half the ships now carry iron nets, silver weapons, and cages." Pip hissed. "For the river folk," Malo said. "For anyone who survives Blackglass," Celestine replied. Naira opened the ledger. Pages listed ship names, chains, transport fees, and payments to buyers in the Eastern Empire. At the bottom of the final page was the royal household cipher. Lucien's cipher. The room seemed to tilt. "Where did you get this?" Naira asked. "From my dowry chest." Celestine's voice stayed steady, but color had drained from her face. "My father told me the marriage would combine our gold with Lucien's western ports. Yesterday I asked to inspect the island revenues attached to my new title. His steward gave me 6 boxes of contracts. He assumed I would admire the numbers." "And did you?" Nessa asked sharply. Celestine met her gaze. For the first hour, Nessa's hand went to her saber. "I was raised to understand profit before prayer," Celestine continued. "I knew laborers were bound to estates. I knew debt contracts could pass from parent to child. I told myself that was law, and law was not my personal cruelty. Then I found purchase prices beside children's names." She swallowed. "One girl was 6. Her price was less than the pearls in my hair." Celestine pulled the pearl pins free one by one and placed them on the chart. "So I stole the ledger." Pip gathered the pearls. She did not put them in her harness. She placed them in a straight line beside the slave contracts, as solemn as a priest arranging candles. Naira's anger changed shape. It did not disappear. Celestine had been willing to profit, while suffering remained distant and politely named. But she had crossed a storm once she saw the truth. Naira knew something about seeing truth late. "What does Lucien intend at Blackglass?" she asked. "He spoke with Vare after you escaped." "I heard only part of it." Celestine looked at Naira. "He said the Tidekeeper would open the door beneath the island. Then the sea would bury every witness for him." The old Tide stories came back to Naira. Blackglass children were taught never to enter the caves beneath Moonwell Tower. The Island Council kept an ancient bronze will sealed behind 3 stone doors. The first Tidekeepers called it the Deep Gate. Later generations treated it as a legend because no one living had opened it. But Naira had seen the wheel when she was 12. Her mother had made her swear never to turn it. "The ancient Tide Gate," she whispered. Malo's body went still. "What does it do?" "I do not know exactly. It was built before the kingdoms. The old charts say it can draw the sea through caverns under Blackglass. Opened on the Widow Tide, it might create a current strong enough to pull ships onto the reefs." "Lucien means to put our ship among them," Nessa said. "Then force Naira to open it," Malo added. "He destroys the contracts and claims the treacherous Marsh fleet died attacking his new territory." Naira could see it now. Lucien had not merely chased her. He had herded every threat toward one place, using the island as bait and execution ground. "He has taken my brother," Celestine said. They looked at her. For the first time, the queen's composure broke. "Elias is 14. Lucien calls him an honored guest, but Vare moved him aboard the royal flagship. I was told my brother would be safe if I returned before the fleet reached Blackglass." Nessa's face softened by 1 degree. "And you came here instead." "I came to ask you to help me save him." Naira closed the ledger. "We will." Malo looked at her. "We have not discussed how. We will discuss it while sailing." "Toward Lucien's trap?" "Toward my home." His jaw tightened. The possessive instinct he hid so carefully moved through his face like a shadow. "He intends to use you as the key." "Then it is fortunate I have experience with keys." Pip patted her harness proudly. Malo turned away, both hands braced on the table. Naira felt the struggle in him. Every wolf tale claimed Alphas commanded, claimed, and kept. He had just declared war over anyone touching her ship. Yet when he faced her again, his voice was controlled. "Tell me the course." Naira pointed west. "Blackglass. By the drowned road." "Then Blackglass it is." Celestine exhaled. Nessa gave her a hard look. You will work for your passage. I can keep accounts, negotiate treaties, speak four court languages, and poison a man without changing the taste of his wine. Can you mend sailcloth? No. Then today you learned something useful. Nessa marched the queen onto the deck. Naira watched them go. Do you think they will kill each other? Not before supper, Malo said. Aunt Isabet packed only one clean tablecloth. Chapter 6. The Drowned Road appeared only when the moon pulled east. It was not truly a road, but a chain of deep channels winding between reefs north of the ordinary shipping route. Naira had charted half of it at 19. The rest existed in fishermen's songs, which meant every distance rhymed and none could be trusted. The Marsh Queen entered at dusk. Naira took the forward platform with a sounding line. Malo stood behind her, one hand at her waist whenever the deck rolled. He did not need to hold her so often. She did not ask him to stop. 12 fathoms, she called. Nessa repeated the depth to the helm. Fog closed around them. The crew lowered the black sails and pulled the ship through water smooth as dark glass. No birds cried. Even Pip stayed quiet, perched on the prow with whiskers trembling. This place smells wrong, Malo said. You can smell water? Stone, salt, old iron. His fingers shifted against her waist. Fear. Naira glanced back. Mine. Everyone's. Yours is quieter. That is because I was raised to be polite. You struck a king in the groin. After supper. His laugh warmed the fog. The sounding line hit bottom too soon. 6 fathoms, Naira called. Then 4. Hard to starboard. The ship turned. A black reef rose beside them, close enough for Naira to touch. Carvings covered the stone, spirals, moons, and long shapes like wolves running through waves. Malo saw them. My people tell a story about sea wolves who guarded the first tide gates. Blackglass tells one about marsh kings who stole the moon. Probably slander. Probably? The old kings stole many things. Records are incomplete. Something struck the hull. The ship shuddered. Men shouted below. Naira leaned over the rail and saw a pale rope tighten in the water. Net. Iron hooks rose from the fog. A hidden vessel pulled the net across their bow. Royal hunters. Crossbow bolts flew. Malo dragged Naira down as one split the sounding pole above her hand. The crew raised shields. Nessa shouted orders from the stern. 2 narrow hunting boats emerged on either side, their rails lined with silver spearheads. They knew the route, Naira said. Someone told them, Malo answered. His eyes flashed toward Celestine. The Golden Bride stood by the mainmast with a sail needle in one hand and an unfinished patch in the other. Shock crossed her face, then anger. I did not, she said. Nessa drew both sabers. Decide later. Fight now. The first hunters boarded. Naira crawled toward the cut net while Malo met them at the rail. He fought in human form because silver hooks tangled the deck. A hunter swung a chain at his head. Malo caught the man's wrist and drove him backward into 2 companions. Nessa kicked another over a barrel and sat on him long enough to tie his ankles. Celestine used her sail needle. The hunter who grabbed her shrieked and released her with the needle embedded through his leather glove. She hit him over the head with a bucket. I prefer poison, she said, but apparently boats encourage honesty. Naira reached the bow. The iron net had caught both sides of the prow. If the hunters pulled it tighter, the Marsh Queen would turn broadside and strike the reef. Pip appeared beside her in human shape. She was a slight young woman with wet brown curls, broad cheekbones, and dark eyes too large for her face. Her leather harness had become a belt crowded with keys. Under, Pip said. She rarely used human speech. Her voice sounded rusty. Cut! The current is too strong. Pip showed sharp little teeth. Otter. Then she shifted and dove. Naira tied a rope around her own waist. Malo saw her from across the deck. Naira, no. She cannot cut iron alone. I will send a crewman. By the time you explain which knot, we will be on the reef. She jumped. Cold water closed over her head. The rope snapped tight. Beneath the surface, the net looked like a black wall. Pip chewed through the leather lashings around one hook, while Naira used the bone knife at her ankle to saw another. The hunter vessel pulled. The net dragged Naira sideways. Her shoulder struck the hull. Air burst from her lungs. Hands seized the rope above and hauled. She refused to release the lashing. Pip bit through the final strap. The net came free. Naira surfaced beneath the Marsh Queen's rail. Malo leaned over it, both hands on her rope. Fear had stripped every trace of calm from his face. He pulled her up alone. She landed against his chest, coughing seawater. His arms locked around her so tightly, she felt the tremor in them. "Do not," he said against her wet hair, voice rough. "Do not ever make me watch that again." Naira pushed back enough to see him. "I cannot promise never to enter water. It is a professional difficulty." "That is not what I said." A hunter charged them. Without looking away from Naira, Malo caught the man by the front of his coat and threw him over the rail. The splash was satisfying. Naira touched Malo's jaw. "I am here." His breath stopped. The battle still crashed around them, but the space between their faces became terribly quiet. His eyes dropped to her mouth. His hands spread over the small of her back. "Naira," he said. "Yes." Pip climbed over the rail, carrying a hunter's entire key ring. Malo closed his eyes. The moon otter shook herself between them. Cold water sprayed their faces. Naira laughed. Malo looked toward the sky with the expression of a man reconsidering every spiritual belief he had ever held. Nessa finished the last hunter by slamming his head between two hanging hams in the galley doorway. The royal boats drifted loose. Their crews floated nearby in cork vests, cursing the marsh sailors who had taken their oars. Celestine approached with blood on her sleeve. Naira's stomach tightened until the queen showed the shallow scrape beneath it. "One of them carried this," Celestine said. She handed Naira a wax strip of paper. It held the drowned road's bearings in Lucien's handwriting. "He knew," Naira said. "I never told him the route," Celestine replied. "I did not know it." Naira read the bearings again. They were based on her own unfinished survey from 10 years earlier. Only 3 copies had existed. One at Black Glass, one in the Free Harbor Archive, and one she had given Lucien when they shared a little boat and too many dreams. He had kept it, not for love, for use. Naira folded the strip until her thumbnail broke the wax. "We continue," she said. That night, Malo found her alone in the stern cabin. She had changed into dry clothes. A lamp swung above the small bunk. Lucien's bearings lay on the table beside her mother's tied journal. Malo closed the door. "Your shoulder. Bruised." "Let me see." Naira unfastened the top of her linen shirt and drew it down from one shoulder. The bruise had already darkened along her collarbone. Malo's face hardened. "It is not fatal," she said. "That does not make it acceptable." He warmed salve between his fingers and touched her skin. His hand was large, the calluses rough, but his pressure remained careful. Naira watched his lowered lashes and the muscle working in his jaw. "You cannot punish the sea for bruising me," she said. "I can dislike it intensely. That will teach it." His thumb moved once along the edge of the bruise. Her teasing left her. They were too close. She could see the faint gold in his eyes, smell rain and salt on his skin. Malo's free hand rested beside her hip on the table, not touching, though the distance felt deliberate. "Why did you not marry Lucien?" he asked. Naira looked down. "He never asked in a way that meant I could remain myself. First he asked me to leave Black Glass and live at court. Then he asked me to wait while he secured the throne. Then he asked me to understand why he needed a richer bride. And you understood? For longer than I am proud of." Malo tied the bandage around her shoulder. "You love the man in the boat." "Yes." "Does any part of you still love him?" There was the jealousy at last, quiet and sharp beneath his control. Naira answered honestly. "I grieve him. That is not the same thing." Malo's hand stopped at the back of her neck. "And you?" she asked. "Do marsh kings collect wives with their tolls?" "No wife." "Lovers?" "You ask like a tidekeeper measuring dangerous depth." "I dislike striking hidden rocks." His mouth curved. "There were women. No promises. No one since the winter." "Why?" "I became difficult to interest." His gaze held hers. Heat spread beneath the bandage. Naira's fingers curled against the table. "That sounds inconvenient," she whispered. "Extremely." He leaned in slowly enough for her to stop him. She did not. Their mouths almost touched. A heavy knock shook the door. "Reef ahead," Nessa shouted. "And if either of you is naked, become strategic about it." Malo rested his forehead against Naira's. "I am beginning to suspect the entire world has Pip's timing," he said. Naira smiled despite the ache in her chest. "We should go save the ship." "Again?" "It builds character." Chapter 7. The island that refused to kneel. Blackglass rose from the dawn sea like the spine of a sleeping beast. Its cliffs were dark volcanic glass. White houses crowded the slopes above green terraces. 3 beacon towers marked the harbor mouths, but no fire burned in any of them. Royal banners flew from the eastern tower. Naira gripped the rail. Home had never looked small to her before. The Marsh Queen hid behind a northern headland while they watched through a spyglass. Ver had landed soldiers in the main village. Fishing boats sat under guard. The island council had been confined inside the salt hall. Worst of all, royal engineers had opened the entrance to Moonwell Tower. They found the tide gate, Naira said. Can they open it without you? Malo asked. My mother's journal says 3 tide seals control it. The tidekeeper's mark is 1. The island council holds another. The 3rd is called the living key. Pip looked up from a breakfast shell. Naira looked at her. Pip swallowed slowly. The carvings on the drowned road came back, wolves running through waves. Sea wolves guarding the first tide gates. River folk who changed shape in moonlight. The living key is Moonblood, Naira said. Lucian needs Pip too. Malo's expression became murderous. Pip climbed into Naira's arms and tucked her nose under one paw. Then Pip stays aboard, he said. The otter lifted her head and snapped at him. I agree with him, Naira told her. Pip snapped at Naira too. Nessa crouched beside the chart. We cannot attack the harbor. Lucian's fleet is less than a day behind us. The smuggler's stair, Naira said. It enters beneath the western orchard. Nessa gave her a look. The honorable tidekeeper knows a smuggler's stair? My grandmother built it. She considered taxes a personal insult. They landed in 2 small boats. Naira, Malo, Pip, and Celestine took the first. Nessa led 12 marsh sailors in the second. The rest stayed aboard to guard the contracts. The smuggler's stair was narrower than Naira remembered and smelled strongly of goats. They climbed through darkness until a stone panel opened into her grandmother's old cider shed. A pitchfork met Naira's throat. State your business, said an elderly woman in a nightdress and iron helmet. Aunt Tavia? The pitchfork lowered. Naira? Tavia dropped it and crushed Naira in a hug. At 70, she was compact, sun-browned, and stronger than most dockworkers. The helmet was an old soup pot with eye holes. We thought the king had killed you, she said. He tried marriage politics first. Tavia saw Celestine's gold dress. Is that the new wife? Celestine stepped forward. Unfortunately. Tavia considered her. Pretty. Poor judgment. I have recently reached the same conclusion. Tavia accepted that with a nod. Within an hour, the cider shed filled with island women. Royal soldiers had arrested most men at the docks after 3 fishermen fought back. The women had been left unguarded because Ver believed they were frightened. They were frightened. They were also carrying kitchen knives, fishing hooks, rolling pins, and one ceremonial sword last sharpened before Naira's grandmother was born. Naira explained Lucian's plan in plain terms. He wants us to open the gate when his fleet arrives. The current will wreck the Marsh Queen and kill the witnesses against him. Then he will chain anyone who survives. So we do not open it, said Mara the baker. If we leave it closed, Ver controls the beacons and the royal fleet takes the island. Then we open it on our terms, Aunt Tavia said. Naira looked at her. It could split the cliffs. Could it? My mother believed so. Tavia's lined face softened. Your mother feared losing home because she had already lost 2 brothers to the sea. Fear made her careful. It did not make her always right. Naira opened the journal. The old diagrams showed water entering the eastern caverns and leaving through 3 western vents. Everyone assumed the gate released the sea like a weapon. But the arrows on the oldest page pointed both ways. It can reverse, she said. Malo leaned over her shoulder. What can? The gate. It does not simply pull water under the island. It redirects the tide. If we open the western vents first, the widow tide might flow away from the reefs. Might? Nessa asked. The instructions are 900 years old and partly describe a festival involving naked priests. I am selecting the useful sections. Tavia sniffed. Cowardice. The priests may have been essential. Even Celestine laughed. Naira studied the map. If she reversed the gate at the exact moment the royal fleet entered the East Channel, the sudden drop would not wreck the ships. It would drain water from beneath them and settle their hulls into the soft black mud flats north of the harbor. No drowning. No escape. We can trap the fleet, she said. Malo followed her finger. What happens if you mistime it? The current hits the village. The room quieted. There was the choice Lucian had built for her. Do nothing and lose Blackglass. Use the gate and risk destroying it herself. Naira's hand trembled over the chart. Malo covered it with his. Fear is information, he said. Not an order. She looked at him. You told Nessa to watch what you do, he continued. What do you choose? Naira breathed through the tightness in her chest. We opened the gate. The plan was simple enough to explain in 3 sentences, which was the only kind Naira trusted during an invasion. The island women would lure Vare's soldiers away from Moonwell Tower. Nessa would free the council from the Salt Hall and recover the second Tide Seal. Naira, Malo, and Pip would enter the tower and set the western vents. Celestine would use the royal signal code to bring Lucian's fleet into the East Channel. And my brother? Celestine asked. We take him from the flagship after it is stuck, Naira said. Celestine nodded. Fear remained in her face, but purpose stood beside it now. Malo caught Naira's arm as the others prepared to leave. You are not going into the tower alone, he said. I said you were coming. You said Pip and I. I am clarifying that if one of us must remain outside, it will be Pip. Pip slapped his boot with both paws. She is the key, Naira said. You are the reason for the door. The words landed low in her chest. Malo, no claim. No command. His voice dropped. Only truth. I have known you 3 days. It has been the longest 3 days of my life. Every time you walk toward danger, the wolf in me wants to lock you in the safest room and sit against the door. That would go badly for the door. I know. That is why I remain a man and ask instead. Let me stand beside you. Naira touched the front of his coat. I was going to. His eyes darkened. Good. That sounded almost like a command. It was gratitude with poor manners. She rose on her toes and kissed him. For one startled heartbeat, Malo did not move. Then his hand cupped the back of her head and his mouth answered hers. The kiss was not careful. It carried 3 days of interrupted breath, fear and cold water, and every time his hand had stopped 1 inch from taking what she had not offered. Naira gripped his coat as he drew her against him. His other hand settled at her waist, warm and possessive without holding her prisoner. He tasted of strong tea and the last edge of restraint. When they parted, Naira's lips tingled. Malo rested his forehead to hers. Was that fear? Information. What did it tell you? That we have been interrupted too often. From the doorway, Aunt Tavia said, I can return with a drum if you need warning. Naira closed her eyes. Malo laughed against her temple. Chapter 8. The women Admiral Vare forgot at noon. Every oven on Blackglass caught fire. Not the houses. Only the ovens. Thick black smoke rolled from chimneys and drifted toward the eastern barracks. Bells rang across the village. Women ran into the street shouting that the royal soldiers' flour had been poisoned. Admiral Vare stormed out of the salt hall. Who poisoned it? He demanded. Mara the baker struck him in the face with a lump of dough. That was the signal. Windows opened. Buckets of ash, fish brine, and overripe plums rained onto the soldiers below. A net dropped across the central square, tangling 6 men at once. Aunt Tavia charged in her soup pot helmet, wielding the ceremonial sword and screaming an island battle cry that translated roughly as your father owes me money. Naira watched from the orchard wall until Vare pulled every guard away from Moonwell Tower. Now, she said. She, Malo, and Pip ran uphill. Malo wore a royal coat taken from a guard in the cider shed. It did not fit across his shoulders. Pip hid inside it, her head occasionally appearing between the buttons. 2 soldiers guarded the tower entrance. Naira approached carrying a bundle of charts. Admiral's order. The Tidekeeper is believed to be entering through the sea caves. 1 guard frowned. Who are you? Pip's head emerged from Malo's coat. The guard stared. Malo punched him. Naira hit the second with the chart bundle. The wooden rods knocked his helmet over his eyes. He swung blindly, stepped backward onto a rolling apple, and landed in the horse trough. I had an answer prepared, Naira said. His question lacked charm. They entered the tower. Moonwell's upper room was round and bare. A dry stone basin stood at its center. Naira pressed her Sealaw badge into a hollow on the rim. Nothing happened. The council seal, she said. Nessa does not have it yet. A crash sounded outside. Royal horns answered from the harbor. Through the narrow window, Naira saw the first black sails of Lucien's fleet on the horizon. They were early. We cannot wait, Malo said. Pip climbed out of his coat and sniffed the basin. She pushed one key into a crack beneath the rim. Pip, that is not a lock. The key turned. Stone groaned. A stair spiraled open beneath the dry basin. Pip looked smug. I withdraw the insult, Naira said. They descended. The stair went deeper than the cliff should have allowed. Blue light shone through cracks in the walls. At the bottom waited 3 bronze doors carved with a moon, a wave, and a running wolf. Naira pressed her badge to the wave. It opened. Pip placed both paws against the moon. Silver light moved through the carving, and the second door opened. The wolf door remained shut. Malo looked at it. Sea wolves guarded the gate, Naira said. My people came from the northern marsh after the old kingdoms fell. That is what the stories say. He placed his palm on the wolf. Bronze warmed beneath his hand. The door opened. Beyond it lay a cavern larger than the royal banquet hall. A bronze wheel rose from the center, its spokes as tall as masts. Water roared below a grated floor. 3 channels vanished into darkness, east and west. Naira approached the control dais. Symbols matched her mother's journal. Western vents first, she said. Then the center lock when the fleet crosses Gull Rock. Pip began fitting keys into the smaller controls. Malo took hold of the western wheel. The cavern shook. He pulled. The wheel did not move. Black fur spread along his forearms. Muscles tightened beneath his coat. Bronze screamed, turning 1 inch. Naira joined him. Together they forced the wheel around. 1 western vent opened. 2 more, she said. A slow clap echoed from the stairs. Lucien stood in the wolf doorway. He wore black armor and a long red cloak. Admiral Vere stood beside him, covered in flower and plum skins, with soldiers crowded behind. Lucien's gaze moved from Naira's hands on the wheel to Malo beside her. You always did choose strays, he said. Malo released the wheel and stepped between them. Careful, Naira murmured. His pride is the largest weapon in the room. Lucien heard. You humiliate yourself for him. A marsh thief with mud in his blood. Interesting, Malo said. You gave away her island this week, but I am the thief. Vere raised a silver crossbow. Pip slipped behind the control dais. Lucien held up one hand. Alive. All 3. The soldiers advanced. Malo shifted. The black wolf filled the narrow approach, fangs bright in the blue cavern light. Soldiers hesitated. Vere fired. Naira saw the silver bolt strike Malo's shoulder. He staggered. Something inside her went white and hot. She seized the wheel's removable locking bar, a bronze rod as long as her arm, and ran at Vere. He turned the crossbow toward her. She hit it aside. The bolt fired into the ceiling. Vere grabbed her braid. Naira drove the bronze rod backward over her shoulder. It struck his nose. He released her, howling. She turned and hit him across the knees. The admiral collapsed onto the grate. Fisherwoman, Naira said, and kicked his crossbow into the channel. Malo, wounded but furious, knocked 2 soldiers into the wall with one sweep of his body. Pip darted among their boots, stealing keys and unlacing greaves. One man tried to run, discovered his boots tied together, and fell face first into Vere. Lucien drew his sword. Blue flame ran along the blade. Dragon blood, then. Naira had seen him breathe fire only once, years before, when fear and rage broke his human control. He had wept afterward and begged her never to tell the court. Now he wore the flame like a crown. He swung at Malo. Naira caught the wolf around the neck and pulled him back as fire struck the grate. Heat blasted her face. The bolt, she gasped. We have to remove it. Malo shifted human. The silver point protruded from his shoulder. His skin had gone gray around it. Lucien advanced. Come to me, Naira. Open the eastern channel, and I will let the Marsh King live. You mean until the gate kills him for you? He brought stolen contracts into my waters. Contracts proving you sold people. Contracts proving my officers exceeded their authority. Your cipher is in the ledger. For the first time, Lucien faltered. Celestine's theft had not been part of his plan. Naira smiled without humor. Your wife reads accounts. You should have married someone decorative. Lucien's rage flared. He lunged. Malo caught his sword wrist despite the silver burning through him. The two men crashed against the wheel. Lucien drove a knee into Malo's wound. Naira grabbed the bolt. This will hurt. Do it. She pulled. Malo roared. The sound became half wolf and shook dust from the cavern roof. He struck Lucien hard enough to send the king across the grate. Naira threw the silver bolt into the water. Malo dropped to one knee. Lucien rose with blood on his lip. Flame gathered in his open hand. Then a sewing needle pierced the back of his glove. Celestine stood in the doorway with Nessa and 20 island women behind her. I told you, Celestine said. My mother recommended a knife. I am improvising. Nessa held the council seal. The salt hall is free. The fleet is entering Gull Rock. Lucien tore out the needle. Elias is on my flagship. If you trap it, Celestine, the boy dies. Celestine went pale. Naira looked at the control symbols. If she opened the western vents, the flagship would settle into mud with the others. It should remain upright. Should. Lucien saw her doubt. You will not gamble with a child. That is why you always lose to men willing to gamble with everyone. Naira remembered her mother's fear. She remembered 6 weeks of patience in the palace, telling herself endurance protected her people. She remembered Lucien using every kindness as a prediction. Fear was information, not an order. Nessa, she said, place the council seal. Lucien's face changed. Naira. Malo, second wheel. He rose beside her, one hand clamped over his bleeding shoulder. Celestine watched the east gauge. Tell me when the fleet passes the black mark. Celestine took her place. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. Ready. Lucien strode toward Naira. Every woman in the doorway stepped between them. Aunt Tavia leveled her ancient sword. Try it. I have disliked you since your hair was longer. Vere crawled toward the stairs. Pip dropped a ring of stolen keys around his neck, hooked it to the grate, and sat on his back. The Admiral swore. Pip patted his flower-white hair. Naira and Malo turned the second wheel. The island trembled. Water thundered into the western channels. The gauge needles swung. Black mark, Celestine shouted. Naira looked once at Malo. He gave her the smallest nod. The course was hers. She opened the deep gate. Chapter 9. When the sea chose her, the sound began beneath Naira's feet. It was deeper than thunder, deeper than any storm. Black glass seemed to draw one enormous breath. Then the sea moved. Water rushed through the western vents in 3 shining walls. The bronze wheel spun. Blue light raced along the floor, through the moon door, the wolf door, and the wave beneath Naira's badge. On the east gauge, the needle dropped. 1 mark. 2. 3. Lucien understood before anyone else spoke. He turned toward the stair. Stop the signal fires, he shouted. Celestine stepped into his path. No. He stared at her as though furniture had offered an opinion. You have no idea what you are doing, he said. I know exactly what I did. I married a king because my father called it duty. I ignored ugly numbers because comfort called them business. Then I found children priced beneath my jewels. Celestine removed the last pearl from her hair and dropped it at his feet. I am finished misunderstanding. Lucien struck her. Naira saw the blow turn Celestine's face. Nessa moved first. Her fist caught Lucien beneath the chin. He stumbled backward into Admiral Vere, who was still chained to the grate by Pip's collection. That was for the queen, Nessa said. Celestine straightened, touched her split lip, and hit Lucien with the heavy ledger. And that, she said, was for the accounts. He fell over Vere. The island shook again. East gauge, Malo warned. Naira ran to the controls. The needle had dropped too quickly. The central wheel resisted beneath her hands. The north vent is blocked. Malo joined her. His shoulder bled through his torn black shirt, but strength returned as the silver poison left him. Together they forced the wheel halfway. The roar changed pitch. Naira looked through a narrow viewing shaft carved into the eastern wall. Far below, Lucien's fleet entered the channel in 2 proud lines, black and gold sails full beneath the morning wind. Then the water vanished from under them. The first warship sank 6 feet, without sinking at all. Its keel settled into soft mud. The mast whipped forward, throwing sailors into nets and rigging. The next ship turned, tried to flee, and slid sideways into a harmless bank of black silt. One after another, 60 royal vessels sat down in the mud like overdressed guests, discovering that every chair had been removed. The flagship remained upright. Celestine gripped the edge of the viewing shaft. Elias. He is safe for now, Naira said. We will reach him. A crack split the bronze control housing. Water burst upward. Pip squealed and leaped to Naira's shoulder. The center will spun backward. The blocked north vent had forced pressure into the old machinery. If the lock breaks, Naira shouted over the roar, the water will flood the village. Malo seized the wheel. How do we hold it? Naira searched the controls. Her mother's journal had shown a locking bar between the western spokes. The locking bar lay 10 feet away beside Lucien. He picked it up. Open the east vent, he ordered. Refloat my fleet. It will send the tide into the harbor, Naira said. Then your island should have accepted its king. There it was plain at last. He did not love black glass. He did not even hate it. He saw it as a surface on which his will ought to be written. Give me the bar, Naira said. Come take it. Malo growled. The sound carried enough wolf to make the soldiers behind Lucien retreat. Lucien smiled at him. You cannot hold that wheel and save her. Malo's hands tightened on the spokes. Naira touched his arm. Hold the island. His amber eyes met hers. Every protective instinct in him rejected the command. She saw it. She also saw him choose her judgment over his fear. Come back to me, he said. I intend to. Naira walked toward Lucien. He held the bronze bar across his body like a sword. Blue flame crawled over one end. Do you remember our boat? He asked. Yes. You said we could remake the world. We were young. I did remake it. I took the throne. I broke the old houses. I built a fleet no rival could challenge. You became every man you once hated. His face twisted. I became strong enough that no one could ever take you from me. You gave away my home at breakfast. A title, Naira. Ink. You would still have ruled it beside me. You keep saying beside when you mean beneath. He lunged with the burning bar. Naira moved left. Heat passed her sleeve. She caught the chain around Vere's neck and pulled. Pip had looped it through the grate. The admiral rolled directly into Lucien's path. The king tripped over his own commander. Naira kicked the bar from his hand. It skidded toward the open channel. Pip shot after it, caught the cooler end in her teeth, and dragged it to Malo. Naira expected Lucien to rise. Instead, he caught her ankle. She hit the grate hard. His hand closed in her hair. Fire glowed behind his teeth. Malo roared her name, but could not release the wheel. Naira reached for anything. Her fingers found Celestine's abandoned pearl pins. She drove one through the leather strap holding Lucien's scale mantle. The clasp sprang free. The heavy mantle slid over his head, covering his face. His fire breath ignited the ceremonial scales around him. Lucien shouted and rolled, wrapped in a smoking black cloak. Nessa dumped a bucket of gate water over him. Steam rose. The Dragon King lay soaked, tangled, and blinking beneath a scorched sugar dragon emblem that had somehow remained stuck to his shoulder since the banquet. Naira got to her feet and took the locking bar from Pip. She slid it between the western spokes. The wheel stopped. The deep gate held. For several breaths, no one moved. Then bells began ringing above them. Not alarm bells. Harbor bells. Black glass was calling its people home. Malo released the wheel. He swayed once. Naira reached him before he fell. His arm came around her. You took too long. I stopped to improve the king's wardrobe. He looked over her shoulder at Lucien, who was being tied with his own red cloak by Aunt Tavia. It suits him. Malo's hand moved to the back of Naira's neck. His forehead touched hers. You came back. I said I would. I know. His thumb brushed her pulse. I am learning to believe you faster. Pip climbed between them carrying Lucien's crown. This time, she did not interrupt the kiss. She simply wore the crown until it slipped over her eyes. Chapter 10. The flagship in the mud. The royal flagship had never been designed to sit in a field. Its gilded bow leaned toward a mud flat where crabs inspected it with open disapproval. Ropes stretched from mast to shore. Sailors hung from the rigging, unable to decide whether they were prisoners or merely embarrassed. The island fishing fleet surrounded it by late afternoon. Naira stood at the bow of the Marsh Queen with one hand on the rail and Malo at her side. His shoulder was bandaged beneath a fresh black shirt. He should have been resting. He had answered that suggestion with a look usually reserved for treason. Nessa steered them over the returning tide. Celestine stood beside her in a plain brown coat borrowed from Mara. Without the pearls and gold, she looked younger and more dangerous. Royal flagship, Naira called through a speaking horn. Release Elias Vale, and lay down your weapons. The tide will return in 1 hour. Refuse, and we will leave you in the mud until winter. A helmeted officer appeared at the rail. We hold the Queen's brother. Any attack, Celestine took the horn. Captain Dorn, I know your wife. I also know about the apartment you keep for her sister. Release my brother before I explain the arrangement to both women. The officer disappeared. Mala looked impressed. Poison without changing the taste. My education was expensive, Celestine said. Elias appeared at the rail 2 minutes later. He was thin, pale, and furious. A guard held one arm. The boy stomped on the man's foot, bit his hand, and jumped into the waiting fishing net before anyone finished lowering it. Celestine climbed halfway over the Marsh Queen's rail. Nessa caught the back of her coat. He is coming to us. Queens do not dive into mud for brothers. This one does. Then wait until the water is deeper. The fisherman swung the net aboard. Celestine dropped to her knees and pulled Elias against her. Naira turned away to give them the small privacy a crowded deck allowed. Melu, what's its hit? You saved him. Celestine saved him when she brought the ledger. Nessa saved him when she freed the council. You saved him when you held the gate. And you? I did some arithmetic. His fingers slid between hers. Terrifying arithmetic. The flagship crew surrendered soon after. So did the other royal ships. Blackglass had no prisons large enough for 6,000 sailors, so Naira ordered them disarmed and fed on their own decks. Men who had expected execution received fish stew and an explanation of the contracts their admirals had carried. By sunset, sailors began offering testimony. Some had guarded cages. Some had looked away. Some claimed they had never known. Naira believed a few and doubted many. The Freeport's tribunal would decide guilt. Her task was to make sure everyone arrived alive enough to answer. Admiral Vere was brought to the harbor under guard. The island women had dressed him in Lord Harrow's torn purple robe, which a captured courier happened to be carrying back to the palace. Pink roses showed beneath it. Flower remained in his hair. Pip had attached 37 keys to his belt, and each step announced him like a badly organized bell tower. Vere spotted Naira and surged forward. You treacherous little. Aunt Tavia hooked his ankle with the flat of her ancient sword. He fell face first into a barrel of eel bait. The harbor cheered. Naira looked at Malo. Should I object? As ruler of Blackwater, I am considering it. And the bait is innocent. Vere rose dripping fish scraps. Pip climbed onto the barrel and returned one of his keys, the key to the slave hold on the flagship. Then she slapped him across the nose with her wet tail. The cheering doubled. Nessa came to stand beside Naira. For the first time since they met, no challenge sharpened her face. I was wrong about you, she said. Naira glanced at her. You were right about some of it. I wore Lucien's pearls while river folk disappeared. I believed not asking questions made me separate from the answers. You also opened a gate that could have drowned your home to save people who distrusted you. I was very motivated by the thought of Vere and eel bait. Nessa's mouth curved. That helped me too. She held out her hand. Naira took it. Celestine joined them with Elias under one arm. Her cheek had swollen where Lucien struck her. The sailors are asking who commands the island now, she said. The council, Naira answered. They keep asking which man. Nessa looked at the harbor women, the Marsh sailors, and the golden bride who had surrendered her own dowry contracts. Then they remain confused, she said. That night, the council gathered in the salt hall. Lucien sat chained to the chair from which Vere had ruled the village. His crown rested on the table. Pip sat beside it, guarding the object she had stolen from herself. The slave ledgers lay open before the island elders. Sailors testified one by one. Celestine explained the household cipher. Nessa presented the original contracts from the Marsh Queen. When Naira's turn came, Lucien finally looked at her. He had lost his armor and royal cloak. In a plain linen shirt, he looked disturbingly like the young man from the boat. Naira, he said, do not do this. Pain moved through her, old and clean. I am not doing this to you, she said. I am telling what you did to others. We can still repair it. You mean hide it? I mean rule. Together, Celestine can have an annulment. I will recognize Black Glass as free. I will give Malo every river east of the marsh. Name the price. Malo stood at the wall behind Naira. She did not need to turn to feel his anger. That is your sickness, she told Lucien. You still think everything has a price because then nothing can refuse you. His eyes filled with a grief she once would have rushed to soothe. I loved you. You loved being forgiven by me. The truth left them both quiet. Naira gave her testimony. The council stripped Lucien of authority over Black Glass. At dawn, he and Vere would be sent under guard to the Free Ports Tribunal with the ledgers, contracts, and witnesses. Celestine formally refused the island title and placed her family's ships under tribunal command until every captive named in the records was found. No one cheered inside the hall. Some victories deserved laughter. This one deserved work. Outside, however, Aunt Tavia had placed Vere's eel barrel beside the prison door and charged 1 copper coin for visitors to add bait. By midnight, she had earned enough to repair the eastern beacon. Chapter 11. A king without a crown. Lucien escaped before dawn. Naira learned it from Pip, who landed on her bed with a wet key in her mouth. Naira sat upright. The room above the harbor office was still dark. Malo slept beside her on top of the blankets, fully clothed except for his boots, because he had refused to leave while the royal army remained offshore. Nothing improper had happened. This fact had required more discipline than Naira cared to admit. Pip dropped the prison key onto her chest. Malo's eyes opened. Gold flashed in the darkness. Whose key? Pip pointed toward the sea. The cell was empty. 2 guards lay snoring beside cups that smelled of Celestine's sleeping herbs. Celestine swore she had not given Lucien any. A palace officer among the prisoners had apparently carried a dose in his ring. 1 small fishing boat was missing from the harbor. Naira knew which one before anyone said it. Her mother's boat. Lucien remembered where it was stored. Of course he did. It was the boat in which he and Naira had first crossed the summer channel. The boat he had repaired with his own hands while hiding from assassins. The old pain was sharper because some memories had been real. He will head east, Nessa said as they gathered on the dock. The royal fleet cannot move, but loyal ships may meet him beyond Gull Rock. Naira watched the paling horizon. No, he wants the crown. Pip still had it. The Moon Otter tucked it more firmly beneath her arm. He will go to Moonwell Tower, Naira said. He believes the gate can refloat his ships. Malo was already fastening his sword belt. We go together. They took a narrow skiff around the western cliff. Pip rode in the bow wearing the crown again. Nessa stayed to secure the prisoners. Celestine stayed with Elias and the ledgers. At the sea cave below Moonwell, Naira found the old fishing boat tied to a black rock. Lucien waited inside the cavern. He had lit 6 lamps around the bronze wheel. Without armor, crown, or guards, he looked exhausted. He also held a fire blade against the north vent rope. Send the wolf away, he told Naira. Malo stepped in front of her. Naira touched his back. No, stay beside me. He moved only half a step, enough that they faced Lucien together. Lucien's gaze fixed on Naira's hand against Malo's coat. 3 days. That is all it took. 3 days was enough for him to ask where I wished to go. You had 10 years. Flame brightened along Lucien's blade. I came back for you. Every war, every treaty, every compromise was to build a kingdom strong enough to keep what I loved. A kingdom is not a locked room. And he is better, a wolf king who threatens war if someone touches your ship. Naira glanced at Malo. He is deeply dramatic, she said. I was making a point, Malo replied. It was a very large point. No one touched the ship afterward. Naira almost smiled. Then she faced Lucien again. Malo wants to protect me. Sometimes he wants to decide for me. The difference is that he notices the want and still hands me the helm. Lucien's face emptied. I would have given you a throne. He gave me a choice. The blade dipped. For one instant, Naira saw surrender in him. She saw the man on the boat who had been frightened and kind. The part of her that had loved him grieved one final time. Then he slashed the north vent rope. Malo lunged. The old rope broke. A counterweight fell. The bronze wheel spun toward the east channel, beginning to release water beneath the royal fleet. Lucien ran for the exit. Naira did not chase him. She climbed onto the control platform and grabbed the severed rope. Malo, the wheel. He chose her command over revenge without hesitation. He seized the spinning spokes. His boots slid across the wet stone. Pip scrambled up the counterweight chain, crown hooked over one paw. She found the broken lock and stuffed a collection of mismatched keys into its gears. Metal shrieked. The wheel slowed. Naira tied the vent rope around the bronze bar, looped it through the western pulley, and threw her weight backward. The wheel stopped one mark before the fleet channel opened. Malo held it while she secured the knot. Only then did they run outside. Lucien had reached the fishing boat. He cut its rope and shoved away from the rock. The returning tide caught him. The little boat spun twice, struck a mud bank, and stopped 10 yards from shore. Lucien stood, tried to jump, and landed waist-deep in black mud. He struggled. The mud took one boot. Malo shifted and leaped from rock to bank. The great black wolf landed in front of Lucien, teeth bared inches from his face. The former king went very still. Naira waded out on the firmer stones. "Do not bite him," Malo growled. "The tribunal prefers complete defendants." The wolf shifted back. Malo caught Lucien by the collar and pulled him out of the mud with one arm. Lucien swung. Malo ducked and drove one clean fist into his stomach. The former king folded. "That," Malo said, "was for striking Celestine." Lucien tried to rise. Naira stepped forward and slapped him. Not hard enough to injure. Hard enough to turn his face toward the island he had nearly drowned. And that was for giving away a country you never owned. Pip arrived carrying the crown. She considered Lucien, considered the mud, and dropped the crown into the deepest part. It vanished with a small, expensive sound. Lucien stared. Pip washed both paws. Malo laughed so suddenly that Naira did too. The laugh broke out of her with the dawn, with exhaustion, with grief finally loosening its hands. Lucien looked at her as though the laughter hurt worse than the blow. Perhaps it did. They took him back to the harbor in his own little boat. Naira sat at the tiller. "Mado set beside here." Lucien sat in the bottom, tied with the anchor rope and missing one boot. No one offered him the helm. Chapter 12. A harbor is not a throne. 3 weeks later, Black Glass held a feast on the repaired eastern pier. The Freeport's judges had taken Lucien, Vere, Harrow, and the named brokers into custody. The Royal Council suspended Lucien's crown pending trial. Celestine returned to the capital as temporary steward, not as his wife. Her first order opened every royal shipping record. Her second sent money from her dowry to the families named in the slave ledgers. Her third appointed Nessa commander of the witness fleet. Nessa complained that court uniforms lacked useful pockets. Celestine ordered 12 pockets added. They arrived at the feast together, arguing about tariffs. Elias followed with Pip on his shoulder. The Moon Otter had discovered that the boy owned a small lockbox full of foreign coins, and their friendship had become intense and financially dangerous. Isabet came from Reed Crown carrying enough food for an invasion. Aunt Tavia greeted her like a sister found late in life. Within 10 minutes, they had seated every unmarried sailor according to private plans no one else was allowed to inspect. Naira stood at the end of the pier in a deep blue gown. Wind pulled at its long skirt and lifted strands of her dark auburn hair from its braid. The sea beyond the harbor was calm, the deep gate closed but no longer feared. Malo approached in a black formal coat. He had refused gold embroidery and accepted silver cuffs only after Isabet threatened to dress him herself. At 29, with black hair tied at his neck and amber eyes bright in the sunset, he looked every inch a wolf king and none of the things Lucien believed a king must be. He stopped in front of Naira. "Tidekeeper. Marsh king. Ye had gift. If it is a kingdom, I have had a difficult month with those." Malo produced a black wooden case. Inside lay a silver navigation token carved with winding reeds and a running wolf. "Permanent passage through every Blackwater channel," he said. "No toll, no inspection, no ruler's permission required. For you, any vessel under your command, and any refugee you carry." Naira touched the token. It was not ownership. It was a road left open. "This is more valuable than a crown," she said. "Most useful things are." She drew a small stone seal from her pocket. The face showed black glass cliffs beneath a crescent moon. "Then I also have a gift." Malo took it. "A harbor seal? It grants you permanent right to dock at Black Glass. You may shelter, trade, repair, feast, argue, and sleep. Generous. Read the edge. He turned it. Tiny letters circled the stone. Permission to birth, he read, does not imply permission to occupy, annex, command, claim, or rearrange the Tidekeeper's furniture. The last clause was important. I moved one chair. Without consultation. It blocked the window. A grave abuse of power. Malo closed his hand around the seal. I accept these limits. His voice had changed. The teasing remained, but something deeper moved under it. The feast sounded far away. Naira felt the wind, the warmth of the sinking sun, and the careful stillness of the man before her. I have another question, he said. Does it involve furniture? Eventually. She laughed. Malo took her hand. I will not ask you to leave Black Glass. I will not ask you to become less than its Tidekeeper. I will not promise that the wolf in me will become reasonable when danger reaches for you. That would be an obvious lie. I will promise to remember that your courage is not mine to cage. I will stand beside you when you want me. I will leave when you tell me. And wherever you set the course, I will be proud to follow. Naira's eyes stung. That is a very long question, she said. I have been interrupted often. What are you asking? He brought her hand to his mouth. His lips touched her knuckles. May I make a home wherever your ship returns? Naira looked at the harbor behind him. Nessa and Celestine were pretending not to watch. They were terrible at it. Isabet had stopped serving pie in Madeira. Aunt Tavia held one hand to her ear. Elias covered Pip's eyes, while Pip looked through his fingers. Naira turned back to Malo. Yes, she said, but I keep the helm. His smile was slow, bright, and entirely hers to answer. Always. He kissed her. This time there was no alarm bell, no reef, no soldier, and no key dropped into anyone's clothing. Malo's arms closed around her. Naira rose into the kiss with both hands in his black hair, while the pier erupted in cheers. Pip waited a respectful 7 seconds. Then she stole Malo's belt buckle again. He broke the kiss and looked down. The moon otter raced along the pier, silver buckle flashing in her mouth. Elias chased her. Nessa shouted that she had wagers on the outcome. Celestine laughed so hard she nearly dropped the slave contract bonfire torch. Malo sighed. I am declaring war. On a moon otter? On theft. You are a smuggler, king. Then I am declaring a professional disagreement. Naira caught his open coat and pulled him back to her. Let her have the buckle. It was my father's. She knows. That is why she always brings it home. Malo looked toward Pip. The otter had stopped at the memorial chest near the beacon. One by one, she placed keys recovered from the dead beside letters waiting to be carried to their families. Last, she set Malo's buckle on top and patted it with both paws. Her collection was never only about pretty metal. Keys were promises that somewhere, a door still remembered who belonged on the other side. Malo's expression softened. Naira rested her head against his shoulder. Below them, the tide turned through the safe western channel. Blackwater sails and island fishing boats shared the harbor without one ruling the other. Women who had begun as strangers stood together around the fire, reading names from the ledgers before each contract burned. Naira had feared that using the deep gate would destroy her home. Instead, the gate had taught her what home was. Not cliffs, not walls, not a gift one ruler placed in another person's hands. Home was the place that opened when its people chose one another. Malo kissed her temple. Where next, Tidekeeper? Naira watched moonlight silver the open sea. Everywhere they told us we could not go. He held out his hand. She took it, and when the Marsh Queen sailed at dawn, the Wolf of Blackwater stood beside Naira at the helm, exactly where she wanted him. Follow Moonlit Romance Library for more dangerous devotion, hard-won justice, and heroines who choose their own horizon.